since I've been interested in the arts. Um, a really formative memory was in kindergarten, and a artist who worked with clay came in, and we all got to play with clay. We didn't have specifically art, um, but just that one time playing with clay, um, I was sort of like, oh, I really love this. And then in school, art had always been my favorite subject. But when I was in high school, I wanted to do a portfolio to go to school for art for college. But my art teacher in high school, that was the first time I came into a person not being supportive. And he wouldn't help me put together a portfolio. So um, I didn't know what I was gonna do after that. And then I went to UMass, um, and sort of entered school with no idea what I wanted to major in, or I was gonna do plant and soil sciences. I love plants too. But that first year, I had made friends with art students um, and just watched what they did in foundations. And so during the year, I sort of did a lot of the same projects and put together a portfolio. So at the end of the year, um, I had decided I did want to major in art. And so I went to the chair and showed him my portfolio, and he accepted me into the program. And so my sophomore year, I did the foundations program. Um, so it's something I always knew I wanted to do. And all of my art teachers up until high school had been super supportive. And it always had been my favorite subject in school because it was a place that I saw um, you did the projects that were assigned and they taught you how to look at things, but also it was a time to play and kind of combine other things you were learning in school into what you were doing. And I really love that about art is that art is a discipline, but it's such a broad discipline. And um, we are living in a time too where interdisciplinary, that word, and practice, artists are working with biologists and there's room for so much to happen within that um, space of just that little word art. So, yeah, it's just something since I was small that I knew was how I processed the world. I mean, that I think is like, so even if somebody told me I couldn't do it and I wasn't doing it professionally, it would be something I would have a practice. And I would go look, I love going to museums or like even just, I love being in other people's studios, because it is something about somebody. It's personal and interesting. It gives an insight. So it's sort of this place that I enjoy being. Um, so yeah, that's that.
So I guess you entered UMass with some understanding what you want to do and how you want to follow up in your career. What has been what has your experience been like in your graduate program and soon after graduation?
Sure. So I went to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design for grad school, and it was interesting. I was young. I now looking back like 20 years, I'm sort of like, oh, I could have waited a few more years. Like maybe it would have been, um, there, I didn't need to rush is sort of the thing. Although it was great that I did it then too, in terms of my life, it was easy for me to pick up and move to another city. It was great. I got to, talked to so many working artists in the Twin Cities, the Walker Art Center's there, um, MCAD, you know, like seeks opportunities for its students. Um, so that was a great um, learning experience, but I do think I could have waited a few more years, like looking back and having that wisdom. Um, but it did definitely set me on a path of you sort of making your own opportunities, like knowing in between grad school and undergrad, I did some residencies. Um, so I guess just something I've learned as an artist is that you are making your own opportunities, having open heart. Like it is part of it is being in the studio and doing the work. That's super important, but also a big part of it is making connections, talking to people, seeking out opportunities. And also, I'm really amazed of with artists that I know that like will organize print portfolios and they'll organize shows so they are wearing multiple hats. And if they're not seeing the opportunity, they're sort of making the opportunities. Um, so with myself, like seeing that too, being like, oh, in between having not gone to school, seeing like, oh yeah, there are these places you can go. Um, and many of them you pay for, but then there's a bunch that you don't pay for. And sort of seeing organizations or residency programs that are the fledgling, like new, like sort of taking those opportunities and not holding on too much to um, is this thing really established? Like, I'm gonna digress, but I went to this place called Elsewhere Artists Collaborative in Greensboro, North Carolina, and it was the second year they had been running residency programs, and it was really wild. This man, George Shear, and Stephanie Sherman, who were partners at the time, but friends, started. It was George's grandmother's thrift store. She had run it for, I think, 70 years. And when she died, the family didn't really know what to do with it. And it's in downtown Greensboro, North Carolina. Um, so it was 3 floors and 2 city storefronts just filled with stuff and a lot of textiles. Greensboro is a big textile industry. So she just had the remnant, like all these bolts of fabric and ribbon. Um, and so I had seen a call for it, and then I'd gone to the Vermont Studio Center, and another person had seen my work and was like, "Oh, I know about this thing that's just started. You should really go there." And so, being taking the opportunity and being open and I was like nervous and afraid because I was like, oh, I'm gonna take the bus to like a city I've never been and like meet people that I've never known. Um, but it did it, and it was such an amazing formative experience, and it was so cool to be at this thing that still exists, and so it's over 20 years old now, and it's changed a bunch, but to be there sort of at the beginning of it, um, it's amazing, and to see these people working hard, um, but also being playful, and they were taking a huge risk and a chance. Um, Sort of that's really, I think, important in art and arts is that there's no guarantee. But in that space, um, there's lot like there's experiences that are like really important. That not everything. It's hard because we live where we do need money, but there's so much about life that isn't monetarily based and so many opportunities um, that are there that are so important that don't have that attached to it that can be considered not important because it doesn't have that monetary backing. I don't know. I know it's hard because especially when you're leaving school and you have loans and you're starting out and the world is uncertain, it's hard to be like, yeah, I'm going to be open to these uncertain activities. I'm rambling anyway, sorry.
No, not at all. And I wanted to tell you that you're not alone. in feeling very comfortable in that space of uncertainty, or not
Yeah.
feeling comfortable, but feeling supported in that very unknown space of uncertainties, but opportunities and kind of freedom, right? That it gives us. And I can speak from my own perspective as a curator. That's what I love in artistic community. This is why I am a curator, because I want to have the same spirit. I want to be part of this idea that you can survive, you can actually do very well, and you can be free. I mean, free to the certain extent, of course, but you can explore, you can be creative, which other professions or other parts of the world does won't give you this exciting, creative thinking life. So you're not alone. Curators are the same, and this is why they're hanging out with the artists.
Yeah.
So can you walk us through your creative process? How do your ideas evolve from concept to material form?
Sure. Um, so it is interesting. Things have changed. I'm working more, I'm a member at CMA's printmaking, so I am working more 2D now and with really specific processes and methodologies, but that wasn't always the case. There's a lot of crossover and like the materials I'm using and things like that actually do still play into it. Um, but I'll go back to sort of how I had been working mainly and then sort of the shift to now. Um, I have always, and this is probably even from childhood, just I think so many materials or anything can play into your artistic expression. Like I've never been wedded to like I do need to do oil painting. And I had been so installation and performance and sculpture had really been my focus because it did give me that space where it's like, well, I don't know if I'll have a studio after I leave school. I don't know if I'll have the money to buy a set of oil paints, but I do know that my practice um, exists and there's these ways of putting things together to as an artistic practice. So how am I going to keep that going? So a lot of times it would be responses to materials and putting them together. My grandparents, my Nana, my Papa had been sewers. So my Nana had taught me to sew. So textiles had really been a lot of my practice, and then like learning to knit and things like that. So the conceptual space, which still exists in my work today, always feels like it's in a home space, like wood floors, floorboards, um, have been a tying theme throughout it. And when I was in Minneapolis, I had found in the dumpster a whole set of floorboards, so that had played into into kind of setting a setting for the work. And it is a lot of things are personal, but then they're also just more like fluid, um, like meditations on these spaces, where it isn't necessarily personal either, where it's like the viewer can take what they want away from how, the in the latest installation I had done at Manchester Community College, just sort of I had these clementine or citrus bags netting stuffed, and they had made almost like a barrack, like a wall. Um, so there's imagery that is coming from around us, but then all with these domestic items. So trying to make these larger conversations out of very mundane, very homely items And that still continues sort of in my prints where the floorboards are still there a lot of times, the drawings and hands. Um, a lot of the installation work, the body is alluded to, but in the prints right now, the body is there, and maybe the body is the home for this imagery that's coming out of um, the sculptural world. So kind of backtracking. Um, so the materials I used really were from finding things and swirling around and like yeah, free piles or free shells or things from jobs. That's like a thing. I've worked a lot of odd jobs. You know, I've done shipping, I've done um worked retail, you know, like so there's this other piece. So as an artist having the studio practice, but then also there's this other world, like I work in retail or things like that. So those materials make it into your practice, make it into the your what's happening. Um, when I had children, my studio practice did change, and it that was about when I was pregnant with my first child. I did an internship at ZMA's printmaking in Florence, Massachusetts, and it's a non-toxic print studio with a focus on trying to move as close to ecologically responsible. You know, that's the mission of the studio. So first of all, print shops are notorious for being super toxic. So I felt comfortable doing an internship there, being pregnant, um, because I had asked Liz, I was like, actually, do you think this is wise? Because in a traditional print shop, that it probably wouldn't be very wise to do printmaking while pregnant. Um, so that was like a major shift because I knew having children would would be such a large amount of time that my work would have to shift. The way like my childcare and work and everything worked out, like I knew there was going to be a shift. Um, and I was so lucky to like to fall in with a place that aligned with my ecological and social values. And so I'm still there today, and now I'm the tech there, and I monitor in exchange for studio time, and I take care of the presses, and the chemicals and things like that. So that sort of 10, 11 years ago now, my daughter, it was 11 years ago when I did my internship, that was a major studio shift for me, was moving into more serious printmaking practices. Um, and I still work with trash or detritus. My main process that I do is I work with Tetra Pak or food cartons, laminated cartons, and I do dry point in them or add medium. So it's a hybrid of dry point and collagraph. Which collagraph is that anyway? So that's my main form of printmaking, and I have been learning slowly the other processes. So I've worked with copper and I've done a little relief. So it's been amazing to be around all these other artists doing their practices and just learning from them. Um, yeah. So, um, and I do still explore within my imagery the things I was exploring, and I still do explore. I have done installations in the past 10 years, although it feels like maybe I haven't. It's there, it's going back and forth, and they are in conversation with each other. It's a
You
long
also
way.
did some artist books.
Yep, yeah.
Can you tell us about your art book making?
Sure. A few of the books have been textile based. So I would print with copper or watercolor monotype onto cotton. Some of the pieces of fabric have been pieces of fabric that I had found. And others would be I would use like fresh muslin. Um, I guess I'll go into them subject wise. One of the books I was invited into a show that Esther White had curated at the Northampton. historical society. Is that it's the Historical Society in Northampton, Massachusetts, but they have this crazy quilt there, and the show is keeping appearances. And it was all the artists who were invited. We were invited to look at this crazy quilt that's in the collection. And it was made by a woman, Mary Lambie, and it was a memorial quilt. To her husband and her two children, who her two children had died in the flu at the turn of the last century, the 1819. Um, so the fabric book that I made was in response to that. And I knew I wanted the book to be made out of fabric because the quilt was made out of fabric. And a lot of I used copper plates because copper um, was used for toile printing. So there's a history of copper plate being used for printing textiles. I also did digital images mixed in and stitching, a lot inspired by the quilt. And also, the graves of the Lambie family are right around the corner from my house where I live. So that was interesting. And working on it, I was also thinking my daughter was she was young at the time. My son wasn't born yet, but just sort of the meditation on, and this was before the pandemic too. So I didn't have that to think about, but I did think about this project when that started. Um, but just also being a parent and having children, and that there is that fear, of that happening. And she also lost her husband too very shortly after. So, um, just thinking about her and her hand in this quilt that was made. Um, and yeah, a lot of times I don't necessarily have language for exactly what's happening, but it is like thinking about something a lot while you're working on it. Um, and there's so many feelings that are coming through while you're doing it. So that is the Lambie quilt, and then a Lambie book that was called "This Will Not Keep You Warm," because the point of that quilt also, crazy quilts weren't necessarily to be used; they were more decorative. So also this book that's a textile that's based off of a quilt isn't going to keep you warm, and sort of the idea of your children dying isn't going, lots of layers of why it's called that. And then another book I had done that is, and thanks for bringing them up because I do feel like these were made at that transition of printmaking and sculpture, and a book is an object, but and it is kind of these transitional objects into what I'm doing right now. Um, so thank you so much for calling that out. The other book was called 35, and it has a lot of the imagery that I still use today and that I had been using in my sculptures. And it's mainly watercolor monotype, and some of the imagery, some of the plates from the Lambie book were used in it, but also there's spiders because thinking about domesticity, and I was staying home with my children at that time. Um, so kind of relating to a spider appears in that book. And I like that there's a rhythm and a moving and a touching with those objects. I've also made some smaller, just like little zines or like one fold. Um, Printed pieces. And now I'm hoping to sort of do another project with that. I am sort of thinking, I just recently, this is maybe more than needed, but I recently left, since I've started doing more teaching at ZMAs and tech work, I've just recently left another job that I had, which was working with small children and families, where I would run play groups. So I did feel like that job in some ways, even though it wasn't forward facing, was an extension of a studio practice because there is a lot of creativity and play and setting up. But it has that has modified my practice for the past 3 years, where my studio practice, I would say it was not as robust. So I do feel like I'm in another transition where hopefully my practice will be a little more robust. It's rambling. I'm so sorry. I ramble a lot.
No, not at all. You're perfect. And I feel a great respect for artists who make books
Mhm.
because I know that it's an area that been overlooked quite significantly because people just don't know where to place it.
Yeah.
And you probably know the Center for Book Arts
In
in,
Minnesota?
in New
Oh,
York.
in New York. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, and they have such a great group of artists and exhibitions, and I really feel strongly supportive of bookmaking and artists making books. So my question was was not random.
Thank you.
Um, can you talk about your artist influences, or perhaps writers, or science theories? What influence you in the in the big world?
In the big world, sure. Um, my the artist that I really still go back to is Annette Messager. I feel like she was somebody that when I saw what she was doing, is like, oh yes, I relate to this. So even still, after 25 years of a practice, um, or yeah, that she's someone that I really do still go back to. David Hammons. I really love. I loved his installation, sculptural, conceptual work is always really like always has been something I've admired, but then the prints, I hadn't known about his body prints until maybe a few years ago, and then just that also was like a new kind of wow, feeling of like, oh, I'm so glad this exists in the world and appreciate him. Um in terms of writers, I really appreciate Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's a botanist and indigenous voice. Um, and so Braiding Sweetgrass, I've listened to them as audiobooks, and just her voice is so lovely, and I like strive to be where she is in terms of relation to plants and the earth, our world. So I think those are things I think about a lot. Yeah, I mean, there's so many, and it depends on the day too, just sort of like, oh, I just saw this thing. I didn't get to see it, but I have the catalog for it. Leila Ali was just at UMass at the UMCA, and her drawings have always touched. Like I'm really drawn to them. So it's too bad I missed the show, but I'm really appreciative that I got a book from it. Somebody gave it to me, so I was like, thank you. Yeah, but always looking, and that's such a big part. And I'm bad with language in terms of always naming, but just experiencing and being open to people's work is such a great. That's really filling. Yeah.
Do you have any current exhibitions on view, or are you getting ready to exhibit some of your
Sure.
work?
Next month at the Hosmer Gallery at Forbes Library in Northampton, I'm part of a print exchange called We'll Get There Eventually. Um, and so the artists who organize that, they are installing that next month. And then in September, I'm part of a group show, and actually the book 35 is going to be in it. That's celebrating 25 years of ZMA's printmaking. We're going to be at the University of Massachusetts Contemporary Art Museum. starting in September. I think the opening is actually September 11th. I don't know. I think it's up for the whole semester. I think that's how it works there. So those are two things that are coming up right now. And I'm going to be teaching a workshop at Shepherd and Maudsley this weekend on Tetra Pak dry point printmaking. I'm teaching a workshop at the Eric Carle Museum in July using jelly plates, which is a really fun, um, easy process. So if you've never done any printmaking and you're interested, it's going to be at the Eric Carle Museum in July. And then in August at ZMA's Printmaking, I'm teaching a 2-day Tetra Pak workshop, which will go more into depth on using mediums and things. So sort of the little view of what's happening right now. Yeah.
Wonderful. And can you give an advice to our graduating students or students who are thinking about going into arts?
Absolutely. Um, I was thinking about this sort of when you're starting out, don't be afraid to check in with your like with teachers or artists you've met. I know it's that's something I always was afraid to ask for studio visits or things like that, but actually being brave about that is actually really important. Because people aren't going to know what you're doing. I mean, it's a little bit different now. People have Instagram and WhatsApp, all these things that they can really instantly be sharing things, but actually making the human connection to share with somebody, I think is really important. Um, and also looking for calls, like actually doing that little bit of office work is really important. So, like there's these systems like, oh, higherculture.org. They have jobs in the culture sector, which is in Massachusetts, you're in Connecticut, but you could still look on there. Um, but there's also calls for artists. So making sure that you look for finding places that do that and just building that into your month. Like once a month, check for something that's like, oh yeah, actually, I'm doing landscape painting and there's a plein air show, call for that. Like just staying on top of that will help get you out there. Yeah, office work, it's real. That's a real thing to do. And just staying in touch with people and not being afraid of that. It's hard to do. It's hard to put yourself out there, but it's important.
Where can our listeners explore your work? Online?
Sure. Online, I have a website and it needs a little work, but it's there. It's amfvz.com. There's no www dot before it. It's just amfvz.com. And also on Zia May's printmaking, they have a flat file. And so you can see my work there, but you can also see a lot of other artists there. And it's really wonderful. So I'll just say the Zia May's printmaking part. It's ZEAMAYS printmaking.com. And if you go there, you can explore the website. But if you go under view work, view art, and go under flat files, you'll find me and you'll find all the members that have submitted portfolios. Yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Angela. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Julia. Thanks for your questions. It was really nice to meet you.